I'm just thinking that if we're blocking sexual energy, that's something that's going to affect every area of our life. What do you see happen to a woman who's embodied in her sexuality?
There's just a lot more creativity, a lot more flow.
We accept ourselves, and so we accept others, and we accept every inch of our bodies. Think about this. What if having more orgasms, connecting to your sexual energy, could be part of the key to increasing your business, your revenue, and pretty much everything in your life? You know, for many of us, we are so cut off from that part of ourselves, and we're in this doing mode. But what if, in tapping into it, our sexual energy, we could enlarge our capacity to receive, and it could be a portal to the divine? That's exactly what we're talking about in this episode. Welcome to Possibilities with me, Hina Khan. I am a former psychotherapist, now peak performance mindset coach, helping you create a life you love through ease, joy, fun, and sex. Hello, Monica, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me.
I am so thrilled to have this conversation. I have so many questions for you, and I think that our listeners are really in for a treat because they're going to learn something that they probably haven't perhaps even thought of before. So I want to get into it right away. And let's start with, what is a sexual embodiment coach? That's how you refer to yourself, right?
Yeah. I made up that term to describe the work that I do. I started out as a sexological body worker and a somatic sex educator. And I feel that it's been almost a decade and I've really expanded and blended in a lot of modalities. So, all of that said, the simplest way that I try to explain it to people is it's like therapy meets sex work, basically. It's a modality that's really geared towards helping people on their personal development journey and helping them build a healthy and holistic relationship with their bodies, with their eroticism, but it is touch inclusive. The sessions are inclusive of a client's erotic energy. So that's something that can be activated in session if a client chooses to move in that direction. And I'm trained in providing one way touch. So if that's something that a client wishes to explore, then that can be part of our journey together.
As you know, many of the clients and the listeners of this podcast, many of them are high performers, female entrepreneurs that are really up to some big things. And as a result, they are in their doing a lot and in their masculine a lot. How does what you do help people connect to their feminine energy?
Yeah. I'd love to just talk about what masculine and feminine means beforehand. I think there's a lot of misperception about these terms. And, they don't really have to be gendered. They're just these two different energies that all human beings have within us. And as healthy adults, we should be able to drop into both, depending on the scenario, and to bring either one, depending on what's appropriate. So if we define masculine energy as like a linear, goal-oriented, penetrative energy versus feminine energy as more receptive, more magnetic, more free-flowing, we can see it's not gendered, but our society does really value the masculine, if we are to define it that way, a lot more. We're very productivity focused and very achievement oriented. And if we look at how that's mapped into the nervous system, we can kind of map the masculine onto the sympathetic nervous system and the feminine onto the parasympathetic. So, for those listeners who might not be familiar with nervous system terminology, the sympathetic typically is associated with the fight or flight response, though we can broaden that understanding to more of a sense of activation. So, whenever we're on and we're being challenged and um, that can be a positive source of challenge as well, but we're focused, we're wired, we're on to something. This is the sympathetic nervous system. And then the parasympathetic is more associated with rest, digestion and just like stillness in the body, muscle relaxation, more of an expansive sensory input. So we're more aware of different sensations in the parasympathetic rather than being hyper focused. So, we can kind of become stuck in what we practice if we're constantly in that doing mode, in that go, go, go mode. The body can actually forget how to relax. So, even when we try to relax, it feels maybe so unfamiliar that there's a sense of discomfort with it. And I think this is why a lot of people turn to things like doom scrolling or watching TV because um, it's it's kind of relaxing, but at the same time, it can be very dissociative. So it pulls one out of their body, and it's not what I would call a true embodied relaxation. So, in terms of the impact of this on our sexuality, if we try to initiate intimacy just from the sympathetic nervous system, it's going to feel very limited in the sense that we'll be working hard for our supposed end goal that we're chasing, and it'll feel like a lot of friction, a lot of hard work for chasing this one end goal, and then it's over. And if we are lucky enough to release, then even that feels pretty unsatisfying. It's just this very
Mm.
it's like a blip of a moment that's over, and then it's not satisfying long term. So we need to learn to occupy more of the parasympathetic so we can add dimension to that experience and make it fuller, and actually allow ourselves to enjoy the journey more and experience it in a deeper way rather than just coming at it from this like point of stress.
Ah, this is such a good point, especially about the rest piece, because rest can actually feel stressful for many of my clients because it is so different and they are not comfortable with rest, and so you're so right, then we will do doom scrolling or watching TV, but it's not an embodied rest. So when you think of embodied rest, what does that look like?
Anything that involves the body in a mindful and conscious way. So, going for a walk and being aware of your body, being aware of your feet as your feet touch the earth, singing, dancing, any kind of mindful movement if you're doing it for the enjoyment rather than the end goal. So, I'd
Mhm.
say even working out could be a good practice as long as you're in an enjoyment of the movement rather than striving for a particular kind of body. So it's important to kind of track our intentions in doing that. Yoga, Pilates, anything like that. Breath work is a great practice. Um, I love cooking and working with food, and it's like there's a lot of senses involved in that practice that can ground me.
Mm. I go back to when you were a stripper in that room, and I think, wow, how you would have slowed things down for the patron in the eye gazing, in the touch, and how intimate that may have felt.
Mhm.
And because that's what you're touching on now, it's like the rest that perhaps some people do in the doom scrolling and the watching a show, it's not rest, it's more checking out.
Exactly.
And so even in that even with the patrons at that time in your life, you were connecting.
Mhm.
And as opposed to an outcome of, "Okay, we have to reach, this for this to be successful." So, it's also even in the way that you're talking about sex and being with a partner, it sounds like you think of success in that realm in our sexuality as different as what we're taught that success looks like in a sexual relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about the journey, and people forget this so often. So, I mean, if I had to sum up my work, I'd say it's really getting people to enjoy the journey rather than focusing on the outcome. And I know orgasm is super important to a lot of people, but the paradox is the less we cling to that and the less we chase it, the more available that can become because we are actually going to the full depth of our capacity and feeling our body and essentially amplifying every little thing that's happening because of the amount of attention that we're paying to those experiences rather than just zipping past them chasing something else.
Now, many of us have grown up, obviously, with the way that pornography is and what we see about sex. So, how do you think that has affected primarily women in their sexual lives?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I see porn as the equivalent of fast food. It's like fast food sex. It's really designed to give a quick dopamine hit. Um,
Mhm.
and as with anything, I think a lot of us have a propensity for getting hooked on that. And, maybe addiction is a bit of a strong word, but in different ways, we can become prone to chasing dopamine highs. And
Yeah.
when we're continually seeing images that are hyper real, meaning that they're kind of like the equivalent of a really sugary, really addictive kind of drink, that can become the new baseline of our experience where the same way if somebody's used to consuming a lot of sugar, they might not appreciate real fruit or vegetables. They kind of lose their taste for it. Similarly, if we get used to chasing certain kind of body type or certain scenario that's not necessarily representative of what you would encounter in a long-term relationship with a partner, then it can lead to a bit of a letdown where suddenly we're not getting the same dopamine boost from those real
Mhm.
world situations. So this is why slowing down is so important. Kind of like doing a detox where you like reset your body and you reset your taste buds and then suddenly real things become the best thing in the world.
And so as we do this and as, as women running businesses, CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs that maybe feel detached from their own sexuality and it becomes another thing to do. So as we start to embody that and connect back to our feminine energy, what do you see happen? And maybe not feminine energy, that's not the right word. Our sexuality
Yep.
that maybe we've been cut off from. What do you see happen to a woman who's embodied in her sexuality?
Way more creativity. Yeah, there's just a lot more creativity, a lot more flow. Um, I was thinking about this morning as I was preparing for the podcast, and I was thinking of this word ecstasy, which really the origin of the word kind of suggests being outside oneself, like a state of self transcendence and connecting with something greater. And there's this interesting new research that's emerging that the pathways in our brain for religious experience and sexual experience actually overlap. So, our enjoyment and our ability to lose ourselves in these things actually use the same circuitry in our body. So if we think about that, it's a way
Mhm.
to transcend our limitations. And when I say that, I mean like the ego mind that can get really stuck um in these contracted ways, maybe like this is the way to do things, or like these are my personal limitations that I can't exceed. Like when we're able to break out of that and experience something that comes close to a non-dual state or a transpersonal state, then it helps us make new neural connections and to see beyond that and maybe try something different or um incorporate something different into one's life that you wouldn't have thought of before, which opens up new possibilities. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense, and in fact, I think it would increase business, revenue, everything, because you're like you said, you're accessing creativity, you're more in flow, you're whole and fully self-expressed. As opposed to, I think, the way that many people have grown up is that they've had to dim down or, repress. So many people have had similar situations that you did where we were very repressed growing up around sexuality. So to be fully self-expressed, to be a woman in business or in your professional life that is fully self-expressed, I think would be unstoppable.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned this term flow.
I think it would. Yeah,
Go
go ahead.
ahead.
No, 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 you go ahead.
The flow state too, like when we are fully embodied and fully present in our lovemaking, it gives us access to flow state, which we also know can be a tremendous source of creativity and
Yeah.
inspiration.
Okay, so then, Monica, how can you help us get into our flow state? At the beginning, you mentioned what you do, and there's, like, one-way touch and things like that, and I know people are like, "When are you gonna talk about that? Like, how does this work?" Because here's the thing, you don't know what you don't
Mhm,
know. Like, how would you know? And I many of us don't even really understand our own anatomy.
mhm.
So how do you help people connect back and connect to their own sexuality? And let's just start with women, in particular with women.
Yeah. So typically, when I start out with a client, we start more on the talking end of things. I think that's where people are most comfortable and most familiar. So there might be some psychoeducation or some education around anatomy and orgasms and how your body works and how your nervous system works, just so clients have a really solid understanding and grounding in that. Um, and as we progress with the sessions, they can become more and more embodied in the sense that there's an invitation to do more body based practices, more hands on work. So, this might look like doing breath work to start understanding how our breathing patterns impact our sense of ourselves, our capacity to tune into our bodies, our capacity to feel pleasure or to regulate the nervous system. So, what we do in particular, of course, depends on the client and that client specific intentions, but we use the breath, we use awareness of the body, training in interoception, which is basically our ability to sense ourselves from the inside, which a lot of people lack in our culture. So we start building
Yeah.
these foundational skills. I teach women about their own anatomy. So typically, when I do that, I have the stereotypical pussy puppet that every sex educator has. It's this plush thing that I use to highlight different parts of your anatomy. And if clients are comfortable, they can follow along with a mirror. So they can disrobe in the session and have a mirror between their legs and follow along and start understanding what's where and how all these parts work together. And if they're having trouble finding something, then this is where I can help because I'm trained in hands on. So I've had a lot of women who, for example, don't know where their G spot is. So this is when I slap on the gloves and I point it out and, help them connect brain and body to understand where that point is within themselves so that they can then find it on their own later. Um, we do things like pleasure mapping. So we might start exploring different kinds of touch, different types of sensation on the body, where either clients can do it on their own body through self touch, or they can ask me to provide the touch. I usually leave that up to the client, and they can start noticing what feels good, what doesn't feel good. What is that ideal approach for their body that really helps them maximize their pleasure? We can do this genitally as well because a lot of people haven't been touched in very creative ways. I'm just going to say most people have one or two settings when it comes to their lovemaking, and they just default to those few moves, which are maybe the same pressure or the same speed. And they haven't really tried what happens if we slow it down or speed it up or try this different combination of things that can really produce a different result. And time. I want to add time is like the magic ingredient that most of my clients have never taken for themselves. So sometimes people are shocked in session if we take, let's say, up to an hour 15 just for a yoni massage. And they're just blown away. They're like, I've never spent this much time focusing on one part of my body. And just the amount of arousal that can occur during that time is so different from what happens when we just have little quickies constantly.
And what is a yoni massage for those that don't
Yeah.
know?
So yoni is a Sanskrit term that refers to the entire female genitalia. We don't really have an equivalent term in English, so that's why I like the Sanskrit term. So it encompasses the vulva, the vagina, the labia, the clitoris, so all of it. Um, And a yoni massage is a very intentional massage of these tissue, and it's not goal oriented in the sense that there's no need to have an orgasm at the end. If that occurs naturally, it's absolutely welcome, but we're not pushing for an outcome. There's no performance involved in this. It's really just meant to help the receiver bring attention and awareness into her body to help facilitate blood flow, um, to help loosen up the tissue if her pelvic floor is feeling tight. It can really help soften and clear lymphatic fluid. And of course, the blood brings fresh nutrients as well. So it's very, very healthy and nourishing.
Mm. And you mentioned that the time aspect of
Yeah.
this. So doing this massage could possibly be for an hour with a client. And what do you notice happens for them? Have you noticed any things kind of across the board as you do this?
Much deeper arousal, definitely.
Mhm.
A much higher level. Like I'm gonna say higher and deeper. If you imagine kind of like a tree that's really, really strong and growing tall, but also rooted deeply. Um, it's a much more profound state than what one might be used to, let's say, doing vibrator quickies constantly, where it's just this little blip of an experience. And they're often surprised at how full bodied it can be too. So a lot of people experience sensations throughout their body, tingling, warmth, movement of energy, maybe different emotions surfacing. It's a very all-encompassing experience that I think a lot of people didn't know that they could access until they try.
And when you're I mean, Monica, I think about what you would have had to do to create the type of boundaries for you to be able to do this work. So to be clear, people can be at whatever level of comfort they are when it comes to
Mhm.
nudity.
Right.
So there are some people that are fully naked
Mhm. Ye
and some may have some clothing on, is that
Yeah,
right?
I leave it up to the client. So I my priority is that the client feels safe enough to choose how they wanna show up and that there's no pressure on my end to move in any particular direction.
And so tell me about the boundaries in this type of work for the client and for yourself.
Mhm. Well, traditionally in sexological body work, which is what I base a lot of my work on, it's all one way touch. And the beauty of this is that it really lets clients go within their own experience. So typically, when we share a sexual experience with someone, there's kind of like two sets of hopes and expectations that come to the table. And what I've noticed a lot of the time is people tend to over prioritize what they think the other person might expect from them. So people are always up in their heads thinking, like, how am I going to reciprocate? And how does this person expect my body to respond in this process? So, even something like um, one partner really just wanting to give another partner an orgasm, it can create stress for that person
Yeah.
to try to get into that state if they're not feeling in the mood that day or it's just not possible that day. So in my container or in sexological bodywork in general, we take all of that off the table. You just show up exactly as you are. There's no expectations, there's no performativity, there's no reciprocation. So wherever the session goes is where we go. And sometimes clients have memories come up or deep emotions come to the surface that need to be addressed and processed. So then that's where the session goes. Or other times it's just more pleasure based and then we follow that. But my objective is really just to follow the client's lead in that session.
And then how about you? How do you hold your own energy? Like, are you getting aroused? Have you gotten
I
aroused?
leave my sexual energy out the door. Now, so typically we don't bring our own energy into the space. That said, we are human beings. So, in the span of my career, were there clients that I felt attraction for? Of course. I'm not going to deny that. And I think this kind of work calls for a degree of maturity from all practitioners to just honor that and acknowledge that and say, okay, I am recognizing that this is present and I'm still aware of the container that I'm holding. And my priority is to act in the client's best interest and to not let that feeling influence my behavior in any way or how I would approach that person. Yeah.
Mhm. So when you say you leave your sexual energy at the door, what does that mean?
Hmm. I mean, I'm not thinking of my pleasure in that moment, so I'm very much in a giving role. Um, and whenever we're giving, we're aware of our boundaries. So I teach this with the wheel of consent. When you're in a giving role, all you need to focus on is where your boundary is in terms of how much is okay to give and what's not okay to give. But we're not in pursuit of our wants in that moment when we're giving. We're
Mhm.
not trying to get our own needs met. So I think it's very important for anyone in this field of work to make sure that their needs are met outside sessions so that doesn't bleed in any way.
Yes, yes, it makes me think of when I was doing my psychotherapy practice and things like transference and countertransference. I mean, there could be times where as a psychotherapist, a therapist can be attracted to their client, for sure, vice versa as well, but you've gotta have a space to deal with that. So you're not bringing that into the room. So that makes complete sense to me. Now, what you're talking about is an opportunity also for your clients to be in the receiving mode. And Monica, with my clients, we talk a lot about them building their empires, creating their annual income as their monthly income, and really being able to create a life they love through ease, joy, and fun. And a big part of it, whenever anybody has a goal that they bring to me, a big part of it is enlarging their capacity to
Mhm.
receive. So this is really interesting to me. This might be something people have to do if they as they build their empires.
Yeah.
I think it's
Do you
connected.
find a contradiction there? If people get too focused on chasing their financial goals, that somehow it might hinder their ability to receive sexually? Because 'Cause they're always, like, in CEO mode?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that one of the things that we talk about in my programs is enlarging your capacity to receive, and we can start with things like even if somebody wants to buy you a cup of coffee or a compliment just to get comfortable in
Yeah.
receiving. So I can just imagine that somebody having an hour yoni massage with you where it is only about their pleasure and kind of body mapping and what they really love, and to be able to receive that would be a way to enlarge your capacity to receive.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's so important for women too. I think I mean, just based on my observation, women might still be less likely to spend money on things like this. And it's very easy for men to spend money on their pleasure, clearly. The bulk of clientele for sex workers are still male. Um, and sure, there are more female clientele these days, but I think women still spend so much time considering, like, oh, where else could this money be better spent? What are my obligations and my duties and this and that? And um, it's just harder to get them through the door.
I just this is so and I love that we're having this conversation. First of all, I know that there's so many people that are listening that didn't even know this was a
Yeah.
thing, that didn't even know that they could have access in a safe space to explore this with somebody that is trained and understands it and can hold the boundaries and hold a container for this. Have you worked because I was just this just came to mind, okay. Has anybody, any woman that you have worked with not had any sort of, I don't know what the word is, like, sexual abuse or trauma?
I mean, there's a spectrum there, but I'd say most women have had non-consensual experiences, unfortunately. A lot of men
Yeah,
too. I'd say it's very rare to meet a client who says that they haven't had any sort of non-consensual experience whatsoever in their lives.
r right, right, and that you can, support them with that in the sense of connecting back to their
Yeah.
bodies.
Yeah. It's so important, especially in more severe cases. Incidents that happen very young that are extremely traumatized. And while the nervous system is still developing, it can really create a certain patterning in the nervous system where trust becomes difficult or even a sense of boundaries around one's own body becomes challenging to navigate. So, um, it either results in somebody being hyper-boundaried and not allowing anything in or not knowing where their boundaries are, and being open to more abuse later on in life. So those are definitely trickier cases to work with to help reestablish the integrity of that.
Yes. And you'd mentioned men as well. How do you work with men for our male listeners?
Similar. Yeah. Similar
Yeah?
process. I think men generally have a better understanding of their anatomy. So, we might not spend as much time going over anatomy and how it works and all of that. But there's a huge component in our work that revolves around nervous system regulation, stress management practices, using breath, understanding how to receive as well. Um,
Mhm.
I think there's also a stereotype that men naturally know how to receive, but that's not I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of them struggle with performativity as well and really getting caught up in um, how they think they need to show up in situations and that being a barrier to them experiencing real pleasure and real fulfillment and connection. So we work on
Mm.
that.
And then how do you work with couples?
Ooh, couples are really fun. I love working with couples. So often when I get two people in the studio together, I've got this like beautiful mattress on the floor with candles and curtains and everything. So it's a very romantic setting. And I'll often guide them through tantric meditation practices and some touch practices, communication practices. Occasionally, if they're struggling with letting one another know what they need or guiding one another in how to approach their bodies. And then I teach them how to touch one another erotically as well. So we could go into a yoni massage or a lingam massage, which is the Sanskrit term for penis, and learn a whole new skill set around ways to pleasure one another that they might not have been aware of.
Mm. And what have you seen happen for people as a result of your work, individuals and couples?
Yeah, I mean, typically, if couples are already good when they come in, then their relationship deepens. And when I say good, what I mean is that they're committed. They're fully committed to one another despite challenges. Um, so they really deepen into that. Sex feels more natural, more comfortable. There's more space for it in their lives, and they can really find new ways of thinking about it, new ways of framing it, so that it's less about frequency and goals and more just about spending time together and really connecting and being intentional about it. And then, in the odd case, some people realize that maybe they shouldn't be together when it comes to couples, and I think that's something to celebrate as well. When through doing this work, they can really um, understand that there might be a fundamental incompatibility and that they might both be happier in different settings.
Mhm. If you were to look at some of the calendars of my clients, you would see, again, they're up to big things. They've got beautiful, full lives. And you mentioned time, and there may be that set point, like you said, that setting of quickie or a setting of just use a vibrator just to have a
Mhm.
release. So, how could those listeners that are thinking, no, I want to do this, I want to slow this down, I want to be able to connect with myself, what are things that they could start to do?
Mm. I mean, just setting aside the time. I think for anyone whose schedule is very, very structured, it would be important to allot a space for doing some sort of embodiment practice, some sort of intimacy practice. And I get a lot of complaints about that. People are like, oh, it's boring. It should be organic and blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, it's not happening oftentimes for these people when they want it to be organic. So either, it's going to happen or it's not, and if it's going to happen, sometimes we have to put it in the schedule to make that space for it, and I often encourage people to not have a goal when they set that time aside to just commit to themselves in some way. You don't need to know what it's gonna look like or what you're gonna do. It doesn't have to be orgasm oriented, but if your partner just set aside that time to engage in some touch or some breath work together or some eye gazing, see where it goes, or if you're solo, just to connect with your own body. Like, I remember in my
Mm,
training, we had to do, I think it was 45 minutes a day during the entire training of just a self-connection practice and journal about it, and, it had to look different every day, so we weren't allowed to fall into any particular ruts, but it was just such a valuable practice to be that
mhm.
intentional about it.
So be intentional. You've got to create the time for it, and don't be attached to an outcome. Did I get that
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay, beautiful. When you've worked with people and they've come back to you maybe months later or you've heard from them after you've worked with them, what has happened in their life
Mm.
as a result of this as a result of connecting to their sexuality and being comfortable in their sexuality?
Yeah. A lot of them feel a lot more comfortable in their bodies, so things that used to feel hard before, like maybe walking around naked in front of their partner or in front of someone new that they're dating, suddenly that just feels easy. There's the sense of being at home in one's body and more self-knowledge, like a real sense of empowerment around their pleasure, being able to take ownership of what they want and what they like, and being able to communicate that with ease, and also that ability to receive, right? To create that space within oneself to receive those things, to ask for those things from their partner, um, to just be in a state of pleasure and ease more of the time rather than
Mm,
worrying and feeling dissociated and feeling broken. It's just there's flow.
and you mentioned being comfortable in your body, seeing yourself naked could be one of the results that happened. I imagine you've seen a lot of
Yeah.
bodies,
Yeah.
all different types of bodies. What do you want us to know about that?
Mm. Whatever you have, just own it. Like, when people own what they have, I think that is the sexiest thing, and I've seen that over and over again. I also have this question on my intake form, by the way, where I ask people to rate their self-acceptance on a scale of 0 to 10. So 10 means that they accept themselves fully, 0 means that they don't accept themselves at all, and I think it's hilarious. Some of the people who walk through my door, like, I just I on an objective level, like, I just think they're really good-looking people, and they'll give themselves the lowest number, and I'm just sitting there thinking
Mm,
in my head, I'm like, "What? Like, what's going on?" Um, and, it really blocks and stifles sexual energy, right? When people
mhm.
feel that negatively about themselves, and conversely, when people are very comfortable, it's magnetic. It just radiates out and attracts people.
Yes. Okay, I wanna just explore this a little bit. So, when people do not accept themselves, what did you just say about that? What you
It blocks
noticed?
sexual energy.
It blocks sexual energy, and it's so interesting because Napoleon Hill in the book Think and Grow Rich talks about the sexual or yes, the transmutation of sexual energy. So what I mean, I'm just thinking that if we're blocking sexual energy, that's something that's going to affect every area of our life.
Mhm. I mean, it impacts our ability to receive. So if you imagine that you find yourself disgusting, let's say that you're very unhappy with your body and you have very many criticisms of different parts of your body. If somebody tries to touch you there, then your first thought is going to be, "Oh no, this person is going to see this or that flaw, and what are they thinking?" And then we project that they're thinking the horrible thing about us that we're thinking, when they might be thinking the exact opposite. They might find you to be the most attractive person they've ever met, but you're like, "Oh no, they're going to see this or that, and then they're gonna leave, or like they're whatever, like they're gonna see the truth of what I look like underneath my clothes." And you just can't get aroused in that state. Like, there is no way that you can really.
Well, you're in your
Yeah.
head. You're not in your
w-
body because 'cause you're just thinking of what the other person might be thinking about you from your judgments that you're
yeah,
projecting.
and half the time it's not even true, right? Like, I've met so many couples where one person just adores the other person and finds them so
Mm.
beautiful, and yet that person is caught in so much negative thinking about themselves that they just can't see it or receive it, and it's really unfortunate.
And then the other part of it, the other side to this is the person that rates them, let's say, rates themselves an 8, 9, or 10, and you're saying that this person is so magnetic.
Mhm.
What do you notice?
Absolutely. There's just a confidence, there's a comfort there. I think it creates permission when somebody is very comfortable within their own body that whoever is around that person, it's like it automatically gives them permission to relax and be in their body too. Because
Mm.
of course, like we still have societal standards. We still have societal messaging around what we quote unquote should look like. And if somebody doesn't meet that, but they're still in radical acceptance of themselves, I just find for me, like, I can take a breath around those people because I know, okay, you're not judging yourself. It probably means you're not judging me either.
Yes. Tell me what you think of this, Monica. I was just reminded of this, because I was thinking of what you talked about here, the block of that sexual energy is a block in receiving. And I was thinking about how a friend of mine had a had this, sounds like an amazing day of lovemaking with multiple orgasms and had her best sales day.
Wow.
So she's having the time of her life with this fella and receiving, and from that energy and that frequency, there's receiving happening at a whole other level into her bank
Yeah.
account.
Not surprising.
So I wanna hear about that. Why is that not surprising?
I mean, I don't go as deep into the energetics of it as probably you do. I'm gonna guess you have a better understanding of that, like the laws of manifestation and such. But I just see it, like, intuitively, it makes sense to me, there
Yeah.
there's an openness in the body, and at the end of the day, we are electromagnetic beings. Like, we emit frequency from our body, and our orgasms have frequency, and, our level of coherence within our body dictates what happens in our environment and how other beings interact with us and how we navigate situations, so it's all connected.
Oh my gosh, like, I think so too. I think what if we could orgasm our way to increase revenue? How fun would that be? Like,
Absolutely.
what if that was part of the tool?
Mhm.
Because one of the things that I talk about, Monica, is, creating through ease. And so what if we used our sexual energy just to be so connected and fully self-expressed that we're not blocking anything that is so good for us that we want to receive? And we are magnetic because we accept ourselves and so we accept others and we accept every inch of our
Mhm.
bodies. I mean, what a way to build a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, there's a deep power in that, and, it just made me think of, I don't know if you're familiar with David Hawkins and his, uh
Yes.
I don't know what the system is called, but kinda like that hierarchy of vibrational states, and when we are in self-acceptance, we can't be shamed. Right? Like, and shame is the lowest thing on that chart. Maybe I don't know if you'll add a link for people to see what I'm talking about because I might be confusing a bunch of people right now. But there's this like vortex of like starting with the lowest energetic frequency up to the highest. And I believe that shame is like the absolute rock bottom in terms of energy, where if somebody is, like, trapped in shame, that's a near suicidal state, right? Like, the belief that I am fundamentally wrong, like, I do not deserve, I should not exist. Um, and so when we're in a state of self-acceptance, even if somebody, let's say, hurls an insult at you, if you know that you're worthy, if you know that you're good, it's just gonna bounce off. There's nothing inside you for it to stick to. So it's a very empowered state to walk around in.
And it's in integrity because if you're in self-acceptance, if you are in self-acceptance, you are in self-acceptance, meaning it's not partial self-acceptance. I accept this part of me, I do not accept this part of me. That's not
Yeah.
self-acceptance. Self-acceptance is the whole, and when we think of integrity as being this, idea of being whole and complete, to have self-acceptance would create a sense of wholeness, which means that what other people think of you or what they're saying about you is really well, it's really it's really none of your business and you're living from that place. And it's so true because I love what you said that when we are in self-acceptance, we are not in shame because shame is truly about who we are, our beingness, as opposed to something like guilt, which is about what we do. And I think of that emotional guidance scale as something that Abraham Hicks talks about as well, and seeing where are you on that.
Yeah.
Um, so that makes complete sense that this is important. Like this is important regardless of what you do. But I think of my clients and many of the listeners and this idea of peak performance that we talk about, self-acceptance is critical.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think a big part of that too is healing shame around sexuality because like you said, it can't
Yes.
be partial. And I think for many people who come to me, they've already done a lot of other kinds of personal growth work on their journey, but sexuality is that one domain that they haven't yet looked at. And they might still be carrying a lot of shame around that for whatever reason, shame around their body or just shame around being a sexual being, period. And I think, in for my journey, that was one of the first things that I wanted to heal because it was just so taboo and so pathologized, um, that for me, I was like, "Okay, what is the worst possible thing I could do in the eyes of my parents and in the eyes of the church, um, to reclaim that for myself and to
Wow.
really discover what it's about, right? To experience it, to vibrate with that energy and integrate it into my being and bring a certain level of consciousness and awareness into how I go about practicing it and let that meet. Kinda like fundamentally this tantric approach of just bringing consciousness into everything. Nothing is
Mm.
evil, nothing is bad. It's how we approach it that makes the difference, and anything can be a path to enlightenment if we decide that we bring the light of awareness into it.
I think you're doing God's work, Monica. I really do. I think that this is an area that is so necessary now, and I'm sure, you're seeing it with your clients and people finding you. You have created a couples meditation that you're
Mhm.
gifting to all of our listeners. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's a 13-minute meditation that starts with grounding into your own body. Because in order to be present with someone, we must be present with ourselves first. We have to be able to feel our bodies. So it starts with a progressive relaxation slash body scan. And then we go into some eye gazing and some heart coherence breathing. So maybe some of your listeners are already familiar with heart coherence, this concept of regulating our breath and breathing through the heart so that the electromagnetic frequency of the heart can bring all the other organ systems of the body into a beautiful unitive state. And I guide you through this as a couple to do this with your partner
Mm.
so that both of you can co-regulate, come into coherence together. And it's a beautiful standalone practice. And it's also a really nice way to initiate other kinds of connection if you wish to go on after the meditation is over and explore touch or sex or other kinds of play, massage, whatever it is that you want to do. It's just a great way to presence fully before that.
Oh, well, thank you for that gift. And I wanted to just mention one more thing because there could be people that want to reach out to you and find out more about your services and how they can work with you, but they may think, but I'm not in the same location as you. So you work virtually as
I
well.
do. I introduced virtual sessions with the pandemic just because there was a need for it. And At first I was skeptical because I was all like hands-on. I'm like, I can't do this virtually, but there's actually quite a bit that you can do aside from the touch. So, in virtual sessions, what a lot of it looks like is guided practices through the screen. And the nice part of this is that people can be at home, you can be in the comfort of your own bedroom, you can opt to have your camera on or off. That's completely up to you and what you're comfortable with. So, um, what I do is basically guide people through the same practices that we'd be doing in the studio, except they're doing it for themselves on their own body. And it can really help you get more familiar with yourself because you have to
Uh-huh.
do it yourself and you can't rely on the practitioner to do it for you. So it's been working well.
The Oh, I love that because it just gives people that maybe would not have access, a way to get some access. The other thing that you do as well is you work with a few couples at the same time. You've done that. You've done groups. How the heck does that work?
I have taught some group workshops. So often in my studio, it allows for 3 couples comfortably where we're all learning erotic massage together. And it's a small group. It's a nice comfortable number where I can still supervise everyone and go around to the different stations and help out with each couple while still overseeing the whole room. And there's enough separation where people like, you'd have to look hard to see one another, but, there's curtains, there's corners in the room that still allow for a nice private space for each couple to work between themselves, and, sometimes it's nice to ride off that group energy as well. Sometimes when people feel other people's energy in the room, it fuels their energy more, and then the whole group energy just grows together, so it's been a lot of fun doing that.
Well, like I said, Monica, I really think you're doing God's work, and I don't even mean that lightly or as a joke. I think what you're doing is really healing generational trauma, for some of your clients that are coming in. I think you're healing future generations as well. You're creating an opportunity for couples to be able to connect and be intimate and playful at this level, which the children in the home, if that's the case, if that's the family configuration, picks up on that, that healthy sexuality, a healthy sex life. They are feeling it as well, like you said, with frequency and vibration because of the electromagnetic beings that we are. And so I think this is very, very important work. I think this is important work. I mean, I am a woman, so I guess I speak more from that perspective, but women that are now really creating their own professional life, creating the kind of income that they want to create, the kind of revenue they want to create, and the difference and the impact they want to make. I think having this piece complete
Mhm.
and access to
Yeah.
it will truly change the planet
Mhm.
with self-acceptance where we're not in shame, where we are whole and complete, and then seeing others as whole and complete as well. In my book, A Return to You, I said that, this book isn't because somebody is broken. It's to remember that they're not in a way. And I think that that's what you do.
Mhm.
So I want to thank you for the work that you do, Monica.
Oh, well, thank you. It's an honor. It's so much fun. It's fulfilling each and every day. And likewise, thank you for being open and having me on the podcast to share about this incredibly hot topic. A lot
Very hot
are
topic.
very afraid of. So thank you for getting that word out to your listeners and also for all the beautiful work that you do in empowering women.
My pleasure, and we're gonna have because I know you people are already in the comments going, "Where do I find more information? Where do I get that couples meditation?" That is all going to be in the description and the show notes, and I really want to encourage you to reach out to Monica, um, if you feel called to reach out to her and see the services that she provides, and if it's something that can support you, definitely do it.
Mhm.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Monica.
Hannah. This was such a pleasure.